Today's topic is that of the millennial reign of Christ. What does the Bible tell us about the millennial reign, the 1,000-year reign of Christ ruling over the whole world? Let's first give some basic info. Why is it called millennial reign? The word milli is Latin, means 1,000, so the millennium is 1,000 years. Just for a side note, before we get started, Satan is well aware of this plan of Christ to rule for 1,000 years over the whole world. He even tries to mimic this, just as he does with the dragon, the beast, or the Antichrist, the dragon, the Antichrist, and the false prophet in the last days, trying to get this unholy trinity. He always tries to mimic God, and he tried and thought that he was going to establish his own 1,000-year reign at the time of Hitler. Who did Hitler target? The Jews. That's who Satan is going to target in the very end of time. And Satan thought that he was going to win it with Hitler, the Third Reich, which Hitler and the Nazis referred to as the 1,000-year Reich, ended in May 1945 after just 12 years. Now, there are tons of Old Testament prophecies telling about this Messiah figure that will set up Israel over all the other nations and give them rule, and he would be king over the whole world. The Jews are still awaiting their Messiah today for this reign over the whole world to take place. The Old Testament prophecies, here's just a few of them because there are a lot. Psalms 2, 72, 110, Isaiah 9, 11, Daniel 2, Zechariah 14, Ezekiel 40 through 46, Micah 4, it just goes on and on. Just a real quick reference to one of them, Daniel chapter 2 with Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the king of Babylon in 600 BC. He had this dream. He saw this huge image. Daniel eventually comes up to interpret the image, and what it means is the head of gold is the Babylonians. It's all the nations of the world symbolically laid out. The Babylonians being the head of gold, the Medes and Persians, the silver, because they would conquer the Babylonians. Then the Greeks, with Alexander the Great, would conquer the Persians, and all the nations of the world, with Rome being the iron. And then the crucifixion of Christ happens, which up until that point, there were single nations that would rule over the whole known world. But once that Christ was crucified and ultimately rejected by the Jewish people, now we have seen this feat of iron and mixed with clay, this mixture of nations now. No one has been able to rule over the whole known world since that time, at least as far as a single nation goes. So the king of Babylon, he sees this giant image, and suddenly there's this huge rock that's cut out of a mountain without the hands of man. Man will not have anything to do with this kingdom that's being represented by this rock cut out of this mountain. Daniel 2:34 tells us, "Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom," which is that rock, "which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." Now, the symbolism involved there is really spectacular, and it's worth noting how the image becomes a great mountain that fills the whole earth. Notice how the image basically stood alone. It was a giant image, but it stood alone in an isolated area of the earth. Well, this image will conquer every bit. It will consume all parts of the world, every animal, every blade of grass, everything, every person, every bird, everything will obey this ruler. So magnificent is the millennial reign that whenever his disciples asked Jesus, "How should we pray?" he says, "After this manner, therefore pray ye, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven." Ultimately, that's pointing to the millennial reign. If you'll recall on the Mount of Transfiguration, whenever Elijah appears with Christ along with Moses, and he's glorified right then. Remember what Peter, James, and John said to him, Simon Peter namely. He says, "Let us set up tabernacles for all of you, 3 of them, so that now we can establish the kingdom," is what he's alluding to. Because they saw Elijah with Christ, and they had always heard the very last prophecy of the Old Testament was that Elijah would come before the Messiah, before the great and terrible day of the Lord. Now, it doesn't happen then, but this messianic kingdom stays on the mind of the Jews, even his disciples, right up until the time that he's about to ascend up into heaven. Remember whenever they asked him, right before he ascends up, when they therefore were come together, they asked of him, saying, Lord, wilt thou at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel? Are you going to exalt us? Because they were told, you'll be made kings. He'll be the ultimate king, but he will make you all kings. And them being in their 20s and 30s, they thought, well, we'll get to be kings. But what they didn't understand was what Jesus replied to them. He says, it's not for you to know these things, this time of which the kingdom will be set up. He says, go out and occupy. Go out and spread this gospel that the Messiah has come to earth. He has overcome death, hell, and the grave, and all in whom believe in him can be saved. They ultimately had to understand that they must first become servants before they rule. Remember how Jesus, the great King of kings, he washed the feet of those fishermen, the most humble man on the earth. But when does the millennial reign begin? Okay, just real quick, there's the 7-year tribulation, the rapture occurs, the Antichrist reigns for 3.5 years, then the wrath of God is poured down, followed by the second coming of Christ, which is when he and all of us with him touch down on the Mount of Olives. By this time, the Antichrist has gathered this enormous world army for one last-ditch effort to try to destroy the Jews, because Satan knows that if he can destroy the Jews, then the prophecy of the Messiah saving the Jews cannot occur, so he will disrupt all prophetic promises. Now, by the time of the end of the 7-year tribulation period, the world is just going to be a wreck. A meteorite struck, the biggest earthquake that's ever occurred. It'll be I reckon, a worldwide earthquake. All the islands disappear. Every city is just annihilated and destroyed. And Christ faces this Antichrist army, and then we're told what he does to them. And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem, their flesh. He speaks a word, and it's like a nuclear bomb going off, basically. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. It's then that we read in Revelation 19 how the Antichrist is then taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. So the Antichrist and the false prophet are put away. We also go on to read how an angel comes down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. And cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that he must be loosed a little season. Now notice how Satan is not cast into the lake of fire. That's because he will be let loose. Once you're cast into the lake of fire, there's no getting out. But he is cast into the bottomless pit, which means that Satan, the Antichrist, the false prophet, the most evil heads of demons are done away with during the millennial reign. That's very important. So as far as this great battle between the devil and Christ is concerned, Jesus wins, and he does it easily. But once again, remember how all the world is just a wreck by that time. And we're about to get into the millennial reign now, but that's how this comes about. Now, it's with this, I would like for you all to recall the prophecy given unto Mary concerning her son. And behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb, and bring forth a son, and shalt call his name Jesus. He shall be great, and shall be called the Son of the Highest, and the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David. And he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end. So we're told right there how Christ will rule from the throne of David. Now it's with that I would like for you all to remember what it's written and prophesied in Genesis 15. Unto thy seed, this is God speaking to Abraham, given a promise, unto thy seed have I given this land from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. Now, as we all know, that is where David had extended the kingdom, because David was a great conqueror. And Israel, as we know it today, being about the size of New Jersey, very small by comparison, it will be restored at that time. Israel will be the very same. And while we're on the subject of King David, we must remember how he and his son Solomon were both types of Christ. Very important to remember this, because David was a warrior king. Remember, he couldn't build the temple because he had blood on his hands. He had killed many, many men. But his son Solomon would be a king of peace. Even his very name signifies it. And he would have the most prosperity of any king that has ever lived until the time of Christ. And it would be Solomon that did build the first temple as we know it, Solomon's temple. Also note how David, before he ruled in Israel, conquered the seemingly unconquerable Goliath from a distance, just like Christ. So once again, after the Battle of Armageddon, the whole world's going to be in rubble. It's then that we find in Daniel 12 this prophecy, "And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waiteth, and cometh to the 1,335 days." And these numbers have often confused a lot of people, but I like David Guzik's analysis of this. We could say that at the end of the 1,260 days, Jesus returns. Now that's referring to the final 3.5 years. But there's an additional 30 days left of the 1290 prophesied in Daniel. At the end of the 1290 days, Jesus' government is officially installed. So it'll take about a month, we reckon, to install the government. At the end of the 1335 days, the nations are judged. Smith commented at this point, "It is quite possible that this period of judgment of those that have lived through the tribulation period, those in whom actually survive, there will not be, I don't reckon, many. There'll be a few million left of the 8 billion that are currently on the earth right now. But those in whom make it through it, this judgment of the Lord will take a 45-day period." There are many different theories regarding those days, but either way, we know that the millennial kingdom temple will be set up, and it's given in detail in Ezekiel 40. And there are many artist renditions that you all can look up. This is probably about as close as I can give. Now, it will be in the millennial temple that Christ will reside. But Revelation 20 tells us this, "And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years." Remember how Jesus is called the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Now notice right here that there are other thrones mentioned and people reigning with Christ. So many of us Christians, having our glorified bodies at that time, we will be given, as part of our rewards, rulership, royalty positions. But is it for everyone? Jesus tells in Luke 19 a parable, and he tells of a Lord in whom entrust his servants with parts of his money. He gives money out to his servants, and he trusts them to go out and bring it back to him with interest. Now this is referring to the fruit that we bear, the service that we have for Christ while on the earth right now. And it came to pass that when the Lord was returned, having received the kingdom, then he commanded these servants to be called unto him, to whom he had given the money, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Then came the first, saying, Lord, thy pound hath gained 10 pounds. And he said unto him, Well, thou good servant, because thou hast been faithful in a very little, have thou authority over 10 cities. And the second came, saying, Lord, thy pound hath gained 5 pounds. And he said likewise to him, Be thou also over 5 cities. And another came, saying, Lord, behold, here is thy pound, which I have kept laid up in a napkin. You see, this servant was content with just being saved. He did nothing. He didn't spread the gospel. He didn't go out and help the poor or the needy or any of that. And the Lord says unto him, Out of thine own mouth will I judge thee, thou wicked servant. Thou knewest that I was an austere man, taking up that I laid not down, and reaping that I did not sow. Wherefore then gavest not thou my money into the bank, that at my coming I might have required mine own with usury? And he said unto them that stood by, Take from him the pound, and give it to him that hath 10 pounds. For I say unto you, that unto every one which hath shall be given, and from him that hath not, even that he hath shall be taken away from him. So many Christians, just as Paul the Apostle warned the Corinthians, will have no rewards. They'll be saved, they'll make it to heaven, but they'll have no royalty, no status, no rewards. I mean, that's just awful. When you get there and you're part of that group, you will feel so horrible. But unto the rest, like Noah, Abraham, David, Moses, Elijah, Paul, the disciples, all of these, and many of us will have rulership over these cities because the world is going to populate very quickly. Now, we're about to come to this. But I would first like to mention the very strange verse that Paul had written in 1 Corinthians 6:3. Know ye not that we shall judge angels? How much more things that pertain to this life? My friends, during the millennial reign, everything will change. The spiritual will suddenly be made manifest unto the physical. We will by then be able to see both physical and spiritual things. So demons will also be seen by us, and we will rule over those demons. And I would say there are a lot of them. But let's get to just a few details concerning Jerusalem itself for the king. Zechariah 14, and it shall be in that day that living waters shall go out from Jerusalem, half of them toward the former sea, and half of them toward the hinder sea. In summer and in winter shall it be. So there'll be these streams coming out from Jerusalem. And it will not dry up in the summer, nor freeze in the winter. It'll be fresh water all the time for 1,000 years. We then read how all the land shall be turned as a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, and it shall be lifted up and inhabited in her place from Benjamin's gate unto the place of the first gate, unto the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananeel unto the king's wine presses. And here's a good artist rendition depicting this. Jerusalem shall be lifted up. Now there's a reason behind this. And all the rest shall be made plain around it. Now you may be wondering to yourself, what for? Because of what's written in Zechariah 14:16, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So now you can imagine just a sea of people, an ever-growing sea of people every year coming to Jerusalem to worship the King. But of all the 7 feasts outlined in the Old Testament that the Jews still keep to this day, why is only the Feast of Tabernacles to be kept in the millennial reign? Because all the rest have been prophetically fulfilled.
Did you know God talked about a holiday that someday all nations will celebrate together? Your knee-jerk reaction might be to guess either Christmas or Easter, but it is none other than the Jewish festival of Sukkot, also known as the Feast of Tabernacles or the Feast of Booths. So what exactly is Sukkot? For starters, it's the last of the 3 pilgrimage feasts, Passover and Shavuot being the other 2 earlier in the year. Leviticus 23, God commanded Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, on the 15th day of the 7th month, and for 7 days is the Feast of Booths. When you have gathered the produce of the land, you shall celebrate the feast of the Lord. It is a statute forever throughout your generations. You shall dwell in booths for 7 days, that your generations may know that I made the people of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." The whole purpose behind this holiday is to remember how God brought them out of slavery and into freedom while providing for them all along the way. And these are reasons to celebrate. The telltale sign that the holiday is underway are the Sukkot, booths, tabernacles that one can spot outside Jewish homes for the whole week. They are like decorated forts on their balcony or in the yard. Think camping. Well, it's more like glamping. People traditionally decorate them with harvest fruits, lights, and lots of color. It's a family affair and something that kids look forward to for months. Then they dwell in their sukkah for 7 days, just as the Lord commanded, to remember their time in the wilderness. He desired to dwell with them during the Feast of Tabernacles, and hundreds of years later, he sent his son Emmanuel, which means God with us, to dwell with us forever.
But Zechariah also tells us another peculiar detail concerning this year after year worship of the Lord by all the world. Of the 8 billion people alive today, only a fraction will make it through the 7-year tribulation period. There will be no more atheists, but many will eventually refuse to worship Christ. Zechariah 14 continues, "And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain." And if the family of Egypt go not up, and come not that have no rain, there shall be the plague, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the feast of tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the feast of tabernacles. Now let's get into more specific details of what everyday life will be like during the millennial reign of Christ. Zechariah 14 goes on, In that day shall there be upon the bells of the horses holiness unto the Lord written, and the pots in the Lord's house shall be like the bowls before the altar. Now what such things are signifying, Pulpit Commentary noted very accurately. The affixing of this inscription on the trappings of the horses signifies that the commonest things shall become holy. All things that men use for work, profit, or ornament shall be consecrated to God's service. In other words, the things confined to only the most holy places of God that were only designated for the priest and others special to God, such quality will suddenly be applied to all things of the earth, because the Messiah will then rule over it. Yea, every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah shall be holiness unto the Lord of hosts, and all they that sacrifice shall come and take of them and seed therein, and in that day there shall be no more the Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts. Now this brings up another question. So the sacrifices of old will be reinstituted during the millennial reign? Yes. There are several passages in the Old Testament that clearly indicate animal sacrifice will be reinstituted during the millennial kingdom. Passages like Isaiah 56, Zechariah 14, Jeremiah 33, Ezekiel 43. Now we know that at the cross, Christ made the ultimate sacrifice. No other need be given. So what's the reason behind these millennial sacrifices? As the Lord's Supper is a reminder of the death of Christ to the church today, animal sacrifices will be a reminder during the millennial kingdom. During that future time, righteousness and holiness will prevail, but those with earthly bodies, the tribulation people that come out of the tribulation that actually live through it, those with earthly bodies will still have a sin nature, and there will be a need to teach about how offensive sin is to a holy and righteous God, how sin brings death. So Christians are usually confounded to learn that sin will still exist in the earth while Christ himself reigns. The preacher David Jeremiah, he had good commentary concerning this note. We can be assured of this. Rebellion won't last long. Yes, people will still be able to sin, not us, but those in whom we rule over. Rebellion won't last long, though. The one who is in charge, Christ, will know the intent of every heart, and there will be swift justice for every wrong. The Bible says our Lord will rule with a rod of iron. He'll be a disciplinarian. That means there won't be any long delays in justice, no long waits for trials, no long waits for sentences to be carried out. I don't think there'll be prisons. I don't think there'll be any of that. If you kill someone, you are killed. Which is an appropriate segue for the next topic. Isaiah 2:4 tells us, And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more during that 1,000-year reign. So all the guns, the nukes, the fighter jets, those will not be present during the millennial reign. There'll be none of that. But people will have pruning hooks. They'll be working out in fields. It'll be a time of peace. But they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. There'll be no fear during that time. No need to lock your door. There'll be none of that. There'll be no robbers. There'll be none of that. If there are, they will be dealt with. Fear will be placed in the hearts of any with wrong intent, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts hath spoken it. No fear. Now we all know how today Israel so yearns for peace in the Middle East. Well, Isaiah 19 tells us there will be peace then. In that day shall Israel be the third with Egypt and with Assyria, even a blessing in the midst of the land, whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, Blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, mine inheritance, they'll all be friends. So peaceful of a time is the millennial kingdom of Christ that even the very nature of the animals will change. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the baby goat, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. You'll be able to walk right up to a wolf and pet it, and the cow and the bear shall feed. Their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The animals will not even hurt one another anymore. And the sucking child shall play on the hole of the asp, And the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice den. This is talking about babies and toddlers. They'll be able to play with snakes, and the snakes will not harm them. So the whole earth we know will just be completely different from what we have ever known before. But even the very atmosphere will change. Isaiah 65 tells us this: there shall be no more thence an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. Now, what's that verse telling us? Charles Ellicott noted on the verse, the prophet Isaiah sees in the restored city, that of the millennial kingdom, not so much an eternal and a deathless life as the return of the traditional longevity of the pre-diluvian and patriarchal age. They will go back to living almost 1,000 years before the flood of Noah. Remember how Adam, he lived into the 900s. Noah died at 950. Methuselah, almost 1,000 years old. Life will not be prematurely cut off as it had been by pestilence and war. He who dies at the age of 100 will be thought of as dying young. Even the sinner, dying before his time, as the penalty of his guilt, shall live out the measure of a century. Even they'll live a long time, the rebels. So not only will the atmosphere of the earth be different, but I believe that all diseases will be done away with as well, so that people can live that long, and they'll have babies, and it's going to populate very, very quickly. But also, before the flood, we know that things grew much, much larger. And I do believe that because of the atmospheric changes that will take place during the time of the millennial reign, things will start to get bigger and bigger, and I even think that human beings will get much, much larger. We have become so accustomed to daily violence that now people are afraid to walk down the street. They're afraid to allow their children to go anywhere because of the kidnappings and the murder and all of these horrible, horrible things. That will not be present when Christ rules. Zechariah 8, thus saith the Lord of hosts, there shall yet old men and old women dwell in the streets of Jerusalem, and every man with his staff in his hand for very age. And the streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing in the streets thereof. So we can safely gather that life under the reign of Christ is going to just be mind-blowingly marvelous. Because, for one, you have to think that before Christ, the most evil man ever, the Antichrist, will rule the whole world for a short time, followed by and defeated by the most marvelous, the greatest of kings. So the earth, it's just going to be a time of absolute polar opposites happening, and the world is just going to be blown away by this. But so at the end of the millennial reign, though, we read about this, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. Now, I personally believe that this is going to be the mightiest army of evil ever assembled. After 1,000 years of no disease, people are still going to be alive. There's going to be tons of rebels, though. And Satan, he's really going to try to get as many as he can. He's going to try to trick them. And this is going to be the last battle of good versus evil, God versus the devil. And I believe that this army is going to be an army comprised of giants. Once again, I think that people are going to grow much larger, faster, stronger. And the rebellion against God that Satan started long ago in the Garden of Eden is going to be ferociously magnified in this battle of Gog and Magog. Revelation 20 continues, and they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city, that of Jerusalem. And fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. Will not have to fight a single bit of them, because God himself wants to win the final victory of good over evil. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And then we're told about the billions and billions that are right now in Hades, burning with the rich man. And they're all burning, and how they'll all be brought up out of that. And all the demons and all the rebels against God, they'll all be brought before him on what is called the Great White Throne Judgment. This is Judgment Day. And every name that is not found written in the Lamb's Book of Life shall be also thrown into the lake of fire, along with Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. It's then that we're told in the final 2 chapters of the Bible, Revelation 21 and 22, about the New Jerusalem, where we will dwell with the Father, the Son. There'll be no temple there. For the Father and the Son shall be the temple therewith, they'll be the light of it, and we will reign with them and live forever and ever, partaking of the tree of life as well as the river of life.